Being home alone had never bothered me before. In fact, I relished the solitude. It was a rare opportunity to enjoy some much-needed peace and quiet in a hectic world. But that night, as I settled into the cozy embrace of my living room couch, I couldn't help but feel a growing unease, as if an unwelcome presence had joined me in my solitude. The evening had started like any other. My family had gone away for the weekend, leaving me to enjoy the house to myself. I had plans to catch up on some reading, watch a few movies, and indulge in some of my favorite snacks. It was a perfect night for it, with a soft rain pattering against the windows and a gentle breeze rustling the curtains. As the hours ticked by, I became engrossed in a thrilling mystery novel, completely losing track of time. The only source of illumination in the room was the warm, flickering glow of a single table lamp. The rest of the house lay shrouded in darkness, a comforting cocoon of solitude. But then, as I turned the page of my book, I heard it, a faint creaking sound coming from upstairs. I froze, my heart racing in my chest. It was the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, as if someone were moving through the house. My first instinct was to dismiss it as my imagination playing tricks on me. After all, old houses like mine were known to settle and make all sorts of eerie noises. But as the seconds passed, the footsteps grew louder and more pronounced, and the sinking feeling in my stomach intensified. I set my book aside and strained to listen. The footsteps were coming from the second floor, unmistakably approaching the staircase. Panic welled up inside me as I realized that I was alone in the house, with no one to turn to for help. I contemplated calling the police, but a nagging doubt gnawed at me. What if it was just a figment of my imagination? What if I called for help and it turned out to be nothing? Summoning all the courage I could muster, I decided to investigate. I crept up the staircase, each step echoing ominously in the quiet house. The hallway on the second floor was dimly lit, with shadows dancing along the walls. I ventured further into the hallway, my senses on high alert. The footsteps had stopped, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. I checked every room one by one, but found nothing out of the ordinary. The house remained as still as a tomb. Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, I heard a faint whisper, a soft, unintelligible murmur that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. My heart raced as I realized that I was not alone in the hallway. Something was with me. A cold draft swept through the corridor, extinguishing the flickering candle I had placed on a nearby table. Darkness enveloped me, and I fumbled for my phone, desperately trying to use its flashlight to pierce the inky blackness. And then, as the light from my phone cut through the darkness, I saw it, a shadowy figure, standing at the far end of the hallway. It was a silhouette, tall and imposing, with long, gnarled fingers reaching out towards me. My blood ran cold, and I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the figure breathing, a low, raspy sound that sent shivers down my spine. It moved closer, slowly and methodically, as if it were savoring the fear that coursed through me. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with terror, trapped in that narrow hallway with nowhere to run. The figure drew closer, its presence filling the air with a malevolent energy. I could feel its eyes on me, even though I couldn't make out any features in the darkness. And then, just as I thought I couldn't bear the fear any longer, the figure dissolved into mist, dissipating into the shadows. The cold draft receded, and the hallway was bathed in the soft, dim light of the moon. I stumbled back to my room and locked the door, my hands trembling uncontrollably. The rest of the night passed in a blur of fear and confusion. I didn't sleep a wink, and as dawn broke, I knew I had to leave that house behind. To this day, I can't explain what I saw that night or who or what had invaded my solitude. But one thing is certain. Being home alone will never feel the same again, and the memory of that chilling encounter will haunt me for the rest of my days. It was a typical Friday night, and I had decided to stay home alone while my friends went out to a local party. I wasn't in the mood for the noise and crowds. so I looked forward to a quiet evening in my small apartment. As the night wore on, I started to feel a growing sense of unease. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something about the atmosphere in my apartment felt different, as if the air had grown heavier. I tried to shake off the feeling and continued watching a movie on my laptop. Around midnight, I decided to make some tea in the kitchen. As I stood at the stove, waiting for the water to boil, I heard a faint noise coming from the hallway. It was a soft, rhythmic tapping sound, like the sound of footsteps. My heart rate quickened as I turned off the stove and strained to listen. The tapping grew louder, and I could tell it was coming from the hallway just outside the kitchen. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was home alone and there should be no one else in the apartment. I slowly approached the hallway, my footsteps barely making a sound on the carpet. The tapping continued, and I followed it to my bedroom door. I could see the faint outline of light under the door, as if someone were inside my room with the lights on. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob. My mind raced with thoughts of an intruder or a break-in. Gathering my courage, I swung the door open, ready to confront whoever was in my room. But to my shock and confusion, my room was empty. The lights were on, the window was closed, and there was no sign of anyone. The tapping, however, had stopped. I searched every corner of my apartment, but there was no one to be found. I even checked the windows and doors to make sure they were locked. Everything was secure. As I sat on my couch, bewildered and anxious, I couldn't help but wonder if I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, I thought. I tried to shake off the fear and return to the movie, determined to enjoy the rest of my evening. But just as I started to relax, the tapping sound returned, louder and more insistent than before. It was coming from the window this time, and I could see the curtains rustling as if someone were tapping on the glass from outside. My heart raced as I approached the window, my hands trembling as I pulled back the curtains. What I saw outside made my blood run cold. There, standing in the darkness, was a figure, a shadowy silhouette of a person, peering into my window. I couldn't see their face, but I could feel their eyes on me. Panicked, I dialed 911 and explained the situation to the dispatcher. Within minutes, the police arrived at my apartment building, and I watched as they searched the area outside my window. But there was no one there. The police assured me that there were no signs of forced entry or any immediate threats, and they promised to increase patrols in the area. They left me with a sense of unease, assuring me that I was safe. But as I locked my doors and windows that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me. Someone who had somehow disappeared into the darkness. The fear and uncertainty stayed with me long after that night, a reminder that sometimes the scariest things are the ones that can't be easily explained. Being home alone had always been a mixed bag for me. On one hand, I relished the solitude and the freedom to do whatever I pleased. On the other hand, it sometimes felt eerie, especially at night, when the house seemed to take on a life of its own. That particular night, home alone, would leave me with an unsettling experience I would never forget. My parents had gone out of town for a weekend getaway, leaving me with strict instructions and a list of emergency contacts. I was well accustomed to these solo weekends and had planned to spend my time binge-watching my favorite TV series, ordering takeout, and generally enjoying the peace and quiet. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I settled in for the evening. I had just started an episode when I heard the sound, a faint but unmistakable scraping noise coming from the kitchen. I muted the TV and strained to listen, but the sound had stopped. It was probably just the house settling, I thought. My parents had mentioned that the old house made all sorts of strange noises, especially at night. I turned the volume back up and tried to ignore the unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. But then, the noise returned, louder and more persistent. It was as if something were scraping against the kitchen floor. My heart quickened as I contemplated what it could be. A mouse? A draft moving an object? My imagination? Curiosity got the better of me, and I cautiously made my way to the kitchen, the hardwood floor cool under my bare feet. The room was dimly lit, with the faint glow of the streetlights outside filtering in through the curtains. As I entered the kitchen, I scanned the area, looking for any signs of movement or disturbance. Everything seemed to be in its place, except for the small kitchen table. One of the chairs had been pulled back, as if someone had been sitting there. My breath caught in my throat as I approached the table. I hadn't moved the chair, and I was certain my parents hadn't either. The realization that I might not be alone in the house sent a shiver down my spine. I quickly grabbed my phone and dialed my parents' number, hoping for some reassurance. The call went straight to voicemail, which was unusual for them. I left a message explaining the situation and waited for a reply, feeling increasingly uneasy. As I stood there, a cold draft brushed against the back of my neck, making me shiver. I turned toward the open window above the sink, realizing that I must have left it cracked earlier. The cool night air had likely caused the curtain to move, creating the scraping sound. Relieved by this logical explanation, I closed the window and pulled the curtain back into place. I took a deep breath, chiding myself for letting my imagination run wild. Just as I was about to return to the living room, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A shadowy figure passing by the hallway entrance. My heart leaped into my throat as I froze in place. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Who's there?" There was no response, only an eerie silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Panic welled up inside me as I contemplated what to do next. I had to investigate, right? I couldn't just stay frozen in the kitchen. With trembling legs, I tiptoed toward the hallway entrance, my eyes scanning the dimly lit corridor. The figure had disappeared from view, but I could still sense a presence, as if someone or something were watching me. I summoned every ounce of courage and stepped into the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of the refrigerator. The house felt different, as if it were holding its breath. As I moved cautiously down the hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. I reached the door to my parents' bedroom and hesitated, my hand trembling as I pushed it open. The room was empty, but the window was wide open, the curtains billowing in the night breeze. Panic surged through me as I realized that someone had been in the house and had just escaped through the bedroom window. I rushed to the window and looked out into the darkness, but there was no one in sight. My heart raced as I realized that whoever had been in the house was now gone. I immediately called the police, and they arrived shortly thereafter to investigate. They found signs of forced entry through a back window, confirming that an intruder had indeed been in the house. My parents rushed back home, and we spent the rest of the night with the police, giving statements and securing the house. Thankfully, nothing had been stolen, and no one was hurt. But the experience of being home alone that night had left me with a chilling realization that even in the safety of my own home, the line between reality and imagination could blur, and the quiet solitude I had once cherished could turn into a nightmare.